Okay, so hi, Misbah, and welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Josephine, thanks so much for having me. I love watching what you're up to on Instagram. It's very interesting to see kind of the behind the scenes of what you do. Especially, you get on stage, but in a bit of a different way. And there's so much discipline that kind of leads up to it and to sustain that kind of performance. So, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that. And I'm so excited to hear even more about you. And you're such an amazing person. And I don't understand how you have time to do everything you do with like your online business, training, and stand-up comedy so many days every week. And I also can relate a little bit to your background story, which I want you to like bring up even more later.
Totally.
And then all the work you've done with like Marcus Philly, functional bodybuilding, Train Heroic, Invictus, and working against gravity, and even Facebook, if I'm not wrong there.
Yeah, I had a client who had a pretty high up position at Facebook. I don't think I can kind of say his name, but like he would get to represent a lot of the other, like a big portion of the company when things went wrong and things like that. He had to kind of stand in front of Congress and stuff like that. So it was fascinating to get to work with somebody who works in such a high pressure, like kind of like an 80-hour plus work week, but still is sane and is just like, loves it. And, yeah, so that was an interesting experience. But to kind of back it up, I started out in the fitness industry. I had this gravitation towards it because it was a personal thing for me to solve. Like I was a skinny kid growing up, I wrestled.
Yeah.
That was kind of the main sport that I did. I wasn't good at team sports or ball sports. And the thing that in wrestling that I really wish I had now, if I could go back, is the knowledge of like functional bodybuilding and strength training and how do you, speed development. That really attracted me. And I met this guy who was a boxing trainer at this gym that I started going to. I was on the treadmill and I saw him punch in the bag a little bit and work in the mitts with somebody. And I was like, wow, that looks so fun. So I remember kind of creating conversation with him. He ended up becoming my trainer for a little bit and also kind of a mentor because I saw like, wow, this is so cool that you're doing what you're doing. I want to do that. But I was like probably 16 or something at the time where I couldn't get my personal trainer certification yet. You have to be 18 or something. So I worked at the front desk and I observed everything, who was doing what. I was like the gossip girl in high school that like knew everything
That's awesome.
about everyone, and how everything worked because for whatever reason, I was interested in it and I also wanted to be there. Right. So, he really helped me like get a job at the front desk. And then I remember kind of when I turned 18, the second that I turned 18, it was like I had been studying for the certification and then I got it a week after that. And then I was off to the races. So personal training is kind of where I started. And then I got into group training. So I've done everything from spinning to yoga to coaching CrossFit to
That's
Olympic
awesome.
weightlifting. And really it was just like chasing kind of what I'm curious about. That's just something, it's a theme now that I look back. It's like, if I'm really curious about something, I get obsessed with it and go into it. So that was kind of, what really like, and then of course I got into remote coaching, for several years with Marcus Philly under functional bodybuilding. But that's kind of a timeline of me in the fitness industry. And then, yeah, you mentioned I do stand up several nights a week. And it's something that plus podcasting to me, I need it to do everything else. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like food. I felt it when I couldn't go on stage as much this past year. You know, it was like drinking, you know, extra large coffees every single day, 2 a day maybe, right? You're doing 2 sets a night. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, let's detox off of caffeine for a bit. And you're like, oh my gosh. So I felt that. It made me realize, though, kind of like how for me, at least, it's about kind of creating the system for myself. So how do I coach? How do I do my own training and take care of myself? How do I kind of, you're right, like run a business? And thankfully it's not just me anymore. There is a team that I have that I can lean on, and that helps a ton. But how do you do that and still have time for your creativity and prioritize that? I haven't figured it out, but that's kind of like my constant, that's the question I'm trying to kind of answer and you know, find some truth in, I guess.
Yeah. So you feel like you're just like going with the flow and like trying to do the best out of the situation, kind of like you also have like these days when you're like overwhelmed and it's a lot to juggle.
For sure. There's a lot of that. I think for me, I do think in a weird way, not that I like this, it's just something I notice is like, I am motivated by, like, for example, when you go on stage and you have a night where you just bomb, right? And this is not abnormal. Mm-hmm. When you're trying new stuff, you're in sometimes unwinnable scenarios, like it's going to happen. You'll walk in with a 50% chance of bombing already. And it's a part of it though, right? That you appreciate when the laughter hits you hard. When you have those experiences kind of not doing well, right? And the pure, I would say, like, part of it is the embarrassment, maybe, the anger of like, oh, why did I say that? Or why did this not work? Like, all of those emotions that come after that is very motivating for me to, like, you know, work harder and kind of stay focused. And you know, if my ego was like up here, it brings it kind of right back down. So I would say, going with the flow, but I know where I want to go. But in each arena, I have an idea, but I also have become kind of really like, I've tried to kind of embrace the unknown a little bit more lately, where it's like, what happened? Because I've always had a tough time. I don't know about you, but ever since I was younger, like, I was more of an end result focused type person, right? It was hard for me to focus on the process. So hard. And even when you're kind of like, all right, I'm going to focus on the process. It's important. You know all the reasons why you should. You know, I'd fall into the trap of the result chase. And so maybe that for me, I've been noticing at least, like, I don't know, what's working. I'm trying to kind of obviously, like, things are working and they're flowing well right now. So I'm like, okay, let's ride this wave until, you know, the tide crashes, and then we'll figure something out.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm just super curious then, how many nights a week, like when it's normal times, not during COVID maybe, but how many times a week do you go up on stage to perform?
4 to 6, I would say.
That's amazing.
4 to 6. And one of those days is like in New York, where you get to do 3, 4, you know, performances that night. And so, you know, you get to think of it as like you get more reps in, right? So what I love about going up to New York is like you can get a week's worth of work done in like a day. And so that's you amazing. Can write something faster, right? Because you have so many, you know, chances to hit the ball, versus, you know, Philly is still a great comedy town. There's a lot of places to go here. I do have to travel a ton though. So it's like I drive an hour regularly, you know, back and forth to get to places that are outside of Philly. Some that are in the city I can walk to, but yeah, New Jersey is the state that's right kind of, you know, right next to us. And, I used to help run a room there, and I still do. It's like, it's about to start coming back now that spot opens up. But Wednesday nights, I used to host and run kind of a show, with a bunch of other people there. So It takes a lot of time.
That's awesome.
You're right. It's one of those things. It's in person, right? You're a lot of even though the time that you're on stage is so minimal, the prep and the lead up and putting up the speakers and organizing the show and, you know, all the tech stuff, like there's so much that goes into it. But it's fun. And yes, I have times where I need a breath from all that. Yeah. But, you know, I at its peak, it's like 4 to 6 nights a week is something that works well for me. If I'm on the edge of 6, that's usually happening if I'm getting closer to like a big show or something I need to tighten stuff up for. I'll ramp it up, but I like to take time equally for writing and that aspect of stand up, you know, and the reflective process and time away from the stage. What does that do? You know, you have to get on stage. That's like an MMA dude being like, oh, like you can't just work out and do bicep curls. Like you do need to do that to kind of prevent some injury and things like that. And it helps to enhance what you're going to do in the cage. But when you're in the cage, you have to get used to sparring and grappling and the things you're going to have in your field of play, you know? So I've always been somebody who's interested in what are the cool work habits, not cool, what are the effective work habits off stage, off the field of play, you know?
Yeah, so have you found something that really works for you? Because as you say, it must be a lot of like reflective processes after. Like, do you do that each time after you step on stage? And how long do you do it? And
I would say it definitely is different depending on the night. For example, like in New York, I'm usually with my comedian friend or two. We travel up together and we're doing sets. And so it's like, you don't have as much time to like fully kind of process. You're kind of just in it, right? So there's a lot of writing that's happening before and after and during the set because your brain is just like boom, boom, boom. There's like all these synapses, it feels like firing. So I like to take advantage of that. Usually the mornings, I used to hate the mornings. I do love them now, just purely for like the no input, you know what I mean? Like, I try not to have music on even for a little bit and just kind of like soak in the silence. And I like writing from that place. But usually the critic in you is like the performer is up there, right? And then as soon as that ends, the second it ends, the critic, I know exactly what I did wrong. I know exactly what I have to change for next time. And so I try to capture that, but not always. It's kind of a knowing. And then you're just marinating on it for the next, night or whatever. So, I would say I found some ways, but it's also fluid and ever evolving.
Yeah, for sure. But that's so interesting that you say that you're like, because it sounds like you're in the present moment when you're up on stage, and then
you have to try to be.
You go back. Yeah, but how do you? Yeah, because that's something that I feel like I struggle with when I go up on stage. So far, because I haven't done it that many times. Is there something special you like do or like think about before you step on in order to try to be your most present like self up there?
Yeah. And this is so important, and I'm glad you brought this up too. It's like people can sense it right away. Like it's so easy in a setting, let's say, where you're doing public speaking and you're talking about business, you're talking about training even. There's no pressure because nobody is expecting you to make them laugh, right? It's just, if that happens, if you say something funny, it's out of context and it's like, oh my gosh, my boss just said a curse word. That's hilarious, right? But when you're in a setting where everybody is there for you, they are waiting for you to elicit that response, everything is more noticeable. You're the only thing up there. You're being observed on every level, like the way you swallow, the way you look, where your hands are. Everything is observed. And so the thing I found I mean, so much of it is before, like the 24 hours maybe beforehand that you're leading up to it, or the couple hours beforehand. But right before you get on stage, sometimes there's that fear, right, that creeps in. You get a little bit of the cotton mouth. You're like, oh my gosh. And that nervousness kicks in. The thing I try my best to step into is like, I'm going to try to make sure I have fun. Like, if I can be in a fun state here, it mirrors back. So one of the things is like, because a lot of times you're performing for audiences who aren't fun, and they don't want to see you there. And they were watching an Eagles game, right? And then you came up and you shut the Eagles game off, and it's like, hey, my name's Misbah Haque. And you're going to deal with those scenarios where the response isn't great. So you have to hold your energy and stay throughout. You're seeing everything that's happening. You're seeing the people who aren't listening and who are. You can calculate all that for some weird reason, but you also have to try to be as present as you can with like how you feel, no filter, right? So nothing kind of like getting in the way between what you're thinking and saying, I guess. It's probably a little different for you because you might not be talking on stage, but the presence thing I would say is like when you shift it from, because when I think, why am I scared? That's like what I spend a lot of time reflecting on. What's making me feel that nervousness that creeps up? One of the things is you care, right? You're like, I love this thing. I want to do well. It's a big deal. You care. But, you know, I think the other end of that is also sometimes putting it on a pedestal. I've had shows that was a really important show to me. Really, really important. Big night. And I blew it. You know, I bombed that. I mean, I didn't bomb, but it was like, it was not what I expected. Your head. It was, in my head. That's the thing, right? In my head, I bombed. And that's like what I have to make sure is like, I define that very well. So that when you go out there, you're like, okay, if I can hold my energy, if I didn't let the audience's tension and negativeness affect kind of what I was going to do, and because it is going to affect it, like you have to adapt a little bit, but as long as it doesn't affect my energy or throw me off, I feel good. If it does, that's when I usually feel like I bombed, where it's like, why did that hit me in that way? And one of the things is I think putting it on a pedestal where it's like, this is such a big event. It's such a big deal. I got to do well. Like there's so much going on in your head to kind of make this happen. And sometimes we perform, like the best performances are when you kind of like, you're not present with all the pressure there. You're just kind of in it and you're doing it. So it's a fleeting state, but that's something I'm always figuring out. And one of the things recently I've been trying is slip into a state of like, I'm here, I'm going to have fun with this. That's why I'm doing this. You know, like instead of like when the fear kicks in, you're trying to trick your mind into kind of like rationalizing, hey, they want to see me, you know, and they may very well not, but like whatever you got to do to like, just get into a bit more of a positive state helps.
Absolutely. And I totally agree. And I love that you're sharing that because it's so important to actually have fun up there, as you say. And that's something that you actually helped me with before my last show, which I'm so thankful for, because like the first show that I did in the beginning of June compared to the one in July, it was so much better because of like the tools that you gave me, and it was so I had much more fun up on stage, and I felt like way calmer, so it really helped. So you like have like you're like into that, like getting into like the right mental space, as you said, like, and we talked about like the present moment and all that. But I'm also like curious, so when did you get into more like the mental like training, like and where, like, how did you get introduced to all that?
You know, that's something that if I pin back, I've always been interested in communication and like how psychology to some degree, not like dense, crazy psychology where I want to go get a degree for it. More so like I like reading what those experts are saying. What are they discovering, especially as it relates to creativity. So it's kind of like this curious chase that I have and have had, but it's just been in different forms. So when I was competing in Olympic weightlifting, I remember meeting with a sports psychologist. I was taking a class at the time, and she met with me afterwards, and we game planned a little bit for, you know, this big meet that I had coming up. I wanted a PR. I wanted to win it. I was traveling a little bit far for it. And, you know, they're in the snatch, for example, very scary move, right? And when you're doing it at heavy weights. And so I had to figure out how to override that fear response. And there were certain things I learned there that I was like, And I just kept it with me because I don't compete in that anymore or have a desire to. But it's like I kept that lesson with me for like, you know, for example, that you know, I talked to you a little bit about that alter ego effect and having kind of a totem that a lot, like for Beyonce, I think it was the microphone or just maybe even stepping on stage. It like she turned into somebody else, not even Beyonce. There's another name she has for it, but it's like
Sasha Fierce.
Yeah. So right, isn't that crazy? So I find that so fascinating. Like I love behind the scenes of process. Anything, you know, I love, like, it could be a chef. What does a chef do in their off time? How do they think? How do they process the world? Like, that to me is so interesting, and we can see that now so easily. We can access that through podcasts. You see it on Netflix. Like, we're constantly being introduced to this new stuff. So I don't know. I think it's just been kind of a curiosity that I had there, and then I've always used it or tried to leverage it to help whatever the goal is. So like my goals have changed over the years depending on what season I'm kind of in, but like, you know, I applied that to coaching. I applied that to competing when I was doing it and training. I still kind of try to apply that. How do I hack my mental or state or mindset to make this to make this more effective, to make this process easier? So yeah, stand up has been really fun because it's like there's so much that is out of your control, and there's so much risk and adrenaline involved that, like, you know, you can plan, but it's funny how things just go out the window and you could be in a completely different zone in a good way, right? You could be like saying stuff you didn't plan and all that, but it's like you have to let yourself kind of absorb that and be okay with it. Like, because there's a moment, I think, mentally where, like, you know, when you're in the present moment and then all of a sudden you realize you're in the present moment, you're like, oh my gosh, wow, that was really cool. And then you're out of it, right? It takes that thinking of it kind of like loops you out of that, whatever that was. And so, you know, for me, it's just that like genuine chase of like what works, what really works. Cause I've tried a lot of things and things that haven't worked or have worked. So anybody who's open, like, especially like you, who's open to optimizing performance and you're open to different, you know, ideas or ways of thinking. You know, I love sharing that because I nerd out on that stuff.
It's so fascinating, and we could probably keep talking about that for hours. So that's awesome. But so did you find it helpful? I'm just super curious, when you did the Olympic lifting as well, like, did you find that helpful as well? What you learned from the sports I can't say it.
Psychologist, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah. Because here's the thing, I got introduced to that alter ego effect and that totem thingy where it was like, hey, put your weightlifting shoes on. When you put your weightlifting shoes on, that is when, when I'm starting to tape my wrists up, because I used to do that. Okay, that is when I flip the switch, because it's a grueling sport, right? Where it's like you can feel so terrible, and you're pushing through, and that's true in every discipline, I think, but where your central nervous system is involved, I was trying to find everything I could to leverage, and that was one of the things. And it really helped me, like visualization and that like rehearsal mentally really, I think, began, or I started taking it seriously when I was competing, and then after that too, because I saw how it helped and how it didn't help when I didn't do it, and things like that. So yes, absolutely. I think one of the things that, I don't know if she actually gave me this or someone else did, but like, again, it started the chase, right? It was like that session, that class started me on like all sorts of different paths. I was talking, if you go look at my podcasts in the first 50, like there's probably a lot of psychology related stuff because I was interested in that, right? So one of the things was visualize yourself from a third person standpoint. So imagine, and I would imagine Hook Grip, Hook Grip, you know, they make the awesome videos of weightlifting and slow-mo and all that. So I did an interview with that guy. I forget his name, but he for a blog post a long time ago. And so I remember him, and I would visualize him behind the camera sitting there because I had seen him at meets. What does it look like from his standpoint to watch my lift? Then what does it look like for me to look out into the crowd and the silence and then lift? And then, you know, anything I could, like also visualizing how heavy it's going to feel. That's something I loved. Daniel Camargo, I think, said that. It's like, it's supposed to feel heavy. You know what I mean? Like when it comes off the floor, it's not going to feel light. So you have to prepare for it to feel heavy. And that really taught me a ton. Yeah, there's so many lessons, not like with Olympic weightlifting specifically, but then around it, just training and movement and fitness, right? That I'm so grateful for because it's carried with me in terms of like, I see the parallels, you know, in the industry, in the industries that I'm in. How do you define, you know, how do you make progress? How do you acquire skill? So much of that, you know, I think if fitness is kind of a part of your life, it's cool because it will give you a different lens to kind of view the other stuff you care about, I think.
Yeah, that's so true. You're so right about that. And so interesting what you say about like, because I feel like that's something I can definitely use when I'm on stage. The thing with like seeing like the judges look at me, how they would look at me, visualize that. And then also how I like see the judges from stage and how I feel, I guess. So like maybe more of like because I'm doing like the posing, so more of like being like fluent and like look good in the different poses. So
exactly. And you know what? Here's the other thing is with weightlifting, here's what was fascinating about it is you can only, because of how taxing it is on your body, you can only put in so many reps, right? Even you can throw hundreds of jump shots, right? And practice at a certain point physiologically, you're going to max out on something if you get to that stage, right? So how do you do it? And there's plenty of research out there now, and it was kind of starting to be popularized, I think, when I was exploring it back then with this. But the rehearsal, going through that mental rehearsal, can elicit the same kind of contractions and the, you know, kind of, they've done this with like bicep curls, like people who visualized themselves doing bicep curls and then people who actually did the bicep curls. And of course there has to be a lot of sensory stuff involved. You feel the squeeze, like you're really in it and not just, you know, not just like half-assing it. But if you do that, then they've seen, you know, the increase in muscle from just that visualization. And why is that? It's because you're able to fire the same connections by putting yourself through the experience, whether that's, I mean, think about like fear and trauma. And when something hits you viscerally like that, what is that? Like a thought can do that, right? You can think a scary thought, or you can watch a movie and it can elicit that response in you. So you can train that response. So that's how I try to view it to some degree, where it's like, it's not comfortable all the time to be like, let me put myself in a scenario where it might not go so well, but then you start to see different angles. How can I approach it differently? And so that stuck with me. It's like you're going to max out at the physical or environmental ability or opportunity that you might have to hit it, right? For example, getting on stage, there's only so many sets, even in New York, 5 sets a night, whatever it is, that you can do before it's like you can't do any more of that. What else can you do to sharpen that time up there? And it's like, okay, put yourself through what it would sound like, what the reaction might be, or what it will be if it's not, you don't get a reaction. So yeah, it's the visualization has so much value, I think. And, as more research comes out and stuff, I think more people are starting to like, it's more normalized and something that, is recommended regularly to people. So yeah, I'm excited to see continue
really
to keep
cool.
up with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. So I want to ask you one last question. And I know that you've been on lots of podcasts before. And I'm so curious, do you have something you would want to share that you haven't shared before, or a question someone you wish people would ask you, or something like that?
Ooh, that's a good question. It's funny because I'm usually the one asking the question. So when, what's something that I wish people would ask me? I feel like when people ask about some of the creative stuff that I'm working on, that usually is kind of like when I hear somebody who's because there's a lot of people who listen maybe to a podcast who you don't reach out, you don't say anything, you just there's just this one-sided relationship for years before they might even, make contact with you. And so when people reach out sometimes and they know, they somehow have listened to an episode I did and they pulled out a specific story or something that I said that I barely even remember, right? It's that always is so fascinating to me. And, not just for kind of it makes me feel good that you're listening, but when questions come from that place of genuine, curiosity, I love that. I love when people go, not how is this supposed to be done, but how do I take this and make it fit for me? How do I fit this puzzle piece into the rest of my, puzzle here? Because those are two different things, right? How something's supposed to be done, what the ideal metrics and markers are. You can get lost in a chase in anything and go down and that's something that's given is oh, okay, I'm interested in, let's say when I got into CrossFit, I'm interested in CrossFit. I love doing this thing. Okay, I want to compete now. I want to do every competition I can. And it's that was just what I saw around me and what I fell into. There was maybe a genuine desire a little bit to do that. But for me, it was the question is, all right, don't fall into doing it for the sake of doing it. How do you intentionally take that practice and embed it into your life? So when people ask that about that in regards to anything, whether that's podcasting, whether that's coaching stuff, creative stuff, I don't know, whatever it is, and I can sense that it's this person's really searching and curious, I appreciate that because I'm kind of that way, and you can sense when somebody's like that, and you ask great questions, and you definitely bring that to the table. So thanks for doing that today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so happy to hear that, and I have so many questions for you, but so we could probably talk for hours. But
I know
we might have to do this again instead.
Absolutely, anytime you want.
I'm so happy you wanted to be on a podcast. I've loved everything you shared. So before we end, where can people find you and things about you?
Yeah, no, thank you so much once again for having me on. This was super fun. And I would say people can follow me, mishq.com. That's my website. Everything that I have, all the podcasts and links to elsewhere, anything you'd want to find is all there. Instagram is also where I'm active. Misbah, MISBAH .Haque, HAWK. But yeah, you can hit me up there. Feel free to reach out, DM me. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah, I always love hearing from people in whatever way. So once again, Josefine, thank you so much. This has been super fun. Thanks for bringing me on.
Amazing. And I'll put all of that in the show notes. And thanks again for coming on, Misbah.
You got it. Anytime.